When we talk about prototyping, what we mean is rapidly creating an approximation of a design so that you can quickly get feedback. Prototyping is the pivotal activity that structures innovation, collaboration, and creativity in design. Prototypes embody design hypotheses and enables designers to test them. Successful design results from a series of conversations with materials. It's not the artifact, it's feedback and iteration. You build some prototypes, evaluate them, and then use what you learned to drive the next design. And prototypes serve 4 distinct audiences: your colleagues, the clients, the users, of course, and yourselves. These conversations can happen with any of these 4 stakeholder groups. Here's a wonderful example of a prototype from IDEO. In the late 90s, they were asked by Kodak to help design the first consumer digital camera. At this point in time, cameras were something with film. Digital cameras open up a host of new opportunities, being able to see the picture you just took, for example. And to explore these new interactions, IDEO created this big camera back. Some things you'll notice are, it's clearly not the scale. It's a lot bigger than the ultimate camera was. And the point of a camera is to be able to take it with you. But this prototype was actually tethered to a desktop computer that ran all the application logic. What I like about this prototype is it shows you how something that is different from the final product in key ways and seriously incomplete. There's not even, in fact, a lens or a way to take pictures. Enables you nonetheless to be able to get useful feedback and iterate your design. Exploring such experience questions through prototypes is particularly important as computing moves off the desktop and into our pockets and homes and environments, where these interaction models and use cases are still emerging and evolving. Often people think about prototypes as just being a quick version of the real thing, and in many ways that's true, but different prototypes help you figure out different things. It's important to have a goal. A classic novice mistake with prototyping is that you'll start out and with one idea and refine, then be done. If you're using prototyping well, you'll explore multiple alternatives. At each stage in your prototyping process, you've got a question, and then from there, you'll have new prototypes with new questions. What you want to be able to do is to focus on the goal and evolve the prototype to fit it, rather than arguing for one particular design. Because goals often have trade-offs, being powerful may be different than being small. You'll have to prioritize, and this is one thing that getting feedback from users can help you do. Early on, the explorations that you have will be really broad. Is it going to be a mobile interaction or a kiosk? As you evolve, the range of the questions that you're exploring gets a little bit narrower. And you evolve further, narrower still, so that at every stage you're exploring alternatives. But by the end, you're no longer asking, is it a mobile device or a kiosk? You might be asking, is the font going to be 9-point Helvetica or 10-point Helvetica? Dark blue or light blue? These days, a lot of us carry a computing device in our pockets, but 20 years ago, that wasn't really the case. There were a couple of early attempts that were innovative and exciting, but hadn't quite caught on yet. In the mid-90s, Palm managed to be able to crack this wide open. By 2000, they sold 8 million units a year and had a 76% share of the personal digital assistant market. How did they figure out how to do something which had been so elusive for many years? What was their process? Turns out the journey to 8 million users starts with a block of wood. This is from the Computer History Museum. Jeff Hawkins, Palm's designer, carried with him a block of wood that was the size and shape that he thought the Palm Pilot would eventually be. And he would use it in all of the ways that he thought the Palm might get used. So, want to check what's on your calendar? No problem. Pull out your block of wood. Want to figure out what somebody's phone number is? No problem. Pull out your block of wood. The version you see here is a little refined. It was even rougher earlier on. But this kind of experience prototype that Hawkins created helped him think through what are the tasks that you would actually use this for. It's easy to tell a story in the boardroom. It's different to live life on the ground. and you can see what are the things that you need to be one button push away. What are others that you can push a little further, deeper into the menu system? What we see with both the IDEO digital camera and with Jeff Hawkins' block of wood is that a prototype doesn't need to be complete. In fact, it shouldn't be complete. It takes too long. A prototype should be easy to change. If your prototype is a block of wood and you think it's a little bit too big or a little bit too small, no problem, cut a new one. And lastly, a prototype gets to retire. While it's active, it is the spec or the reasoning instrument for a piece of your design process. And later in the process, you're going to build a higher fidelity version. These early prototypes get to retire. You should create different prototypes to ask different questions. So if all of our prototypes are asking some question, some of your questions or prototypes might be, how does it look? This is a sketch by Mike Krieger. It was one of the first times that they started to figure out what the Instagram user interface was going to look like. You can see the millimeter markers on this sketch. Other times, and here's a prototype of an enterprise software application, you might ask, what might it work like? Because these different prototypes are focusing on different pieces, they can happen often at the same time. And lastly, some prototypes will focus on the experience design. This is a wonderful example from SAP of a kiosk interface that's being prototyped with somebody inside a cardboard box performing the kiosk. Because prototypes are questions, what matters is the quantity and quality of the information that you get back. So as you go in time with your prototypes, you can think about how much are you learning as a function of time. If you are making prototypes that don't give you new knowledge, you're really wasting your design process. Instead, you want to front load what are the thorniest questions that you have in your design process so that you can learn the hard stuff first and quickly, and then evolve to success as you go on. And remember, these are going to be incomplete, so you'll jettison them as they become no longer needed in your design process. Prototypes aren't just for small stuff like handheld computers and digital cameras. You can prototype really big things too. For example, Walter Dorwin Teague was asked to prototype the interior for the first cross-country jet airliner. In fact, his company still has a contract with Boeing. Here's Teague standing inside that prototype. Looks like a normal jet airplane, except there's no jet airplane. Teague is inside a shell, inside a warehouse. And yet they built the entire aircraft, and they invited passengers to pack for a trip, come on with their luggage, sit down, the plane would take off, and in the air the flight attendants would come through offering drinks and food. They still did that then. And we were able to see what the whole experience would work like. How does loading work? Are the bins of a reasonable height? Will people bang into each other too much? Like the camera, like the wooden block, the jet interior prototype is really incomplete. And of course, there was another team prototyping the works like of the engine and all of the other components. And at the end, it all comes together. This rapid exploration is, I think, why the Nobel laureate Linus Pauling says that the best way to have a good idea is to have lots of ideas. Here's an example of prototypes for the first Microsoft mouse. This was the first time that Microsoft offered the ability to have a direct manipulation input device and a graphical user interface. Microsoft worked with IDEO, who made more than 100 prototypes of different form and experience trade-offs. Should it be cupped to the hand? Should it be stylized? How many buttons is it going to have? Should the buttons be the same size? What's the relationship between the cord and the button location? Tons of questions, and you got to try them all out. In the design process that we have here, there's a clear endpoint. This is release. Normal product design has this cycle. At some point, the Palm Pilot releases, the jet airliner flies, the consumers take pictures with a digital camera. With software as a service, this release point is often more ambiguous. So on the web, we're seeing more and more people who are focusing on release early and often. When does the release early and often strategy work? Well, it depends a lot on the cost of change over time. Automobiles, after you release them, hard to change. Software as a service, on the other hand, can be a lot cheaper. In this model, you need a really strong release point. In this model, you can explore and see what happens. You are, of course, building a user base, building a reputation, so you don't want to just throw any old junk out there. But there are reasons why many good web services have their beta version and try things out before they release more widely. So if there's one takeaway from this video, it's the insight that prototypes are questions, and I encourage you to ask lots of them.